A very warm good evening, everyone. Welcome to Lecture 6 of Professor H.D. Sankalia monthly lecture series on Jain heritage. Today's talk will be on the topic Art and Icons Investigating Early Medieval Jain Bronze Sculptures from Jharkhand. This lecture series has been an initiative of Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology, Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology, Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, deemed to be University Pune. This particular series has been named after the founder of the Department of Archaeology at Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, Professor H.D. Sankalia. Professor H.D. Sankalia, sir, along with Dr. Shobna Gokhale, madam, read an inscription. So earlier, the scholars were not very much unanimous about accepting the antiquity of Jainism in the region of Maharashtra, say the Western Deccan. But because of the reading and interpretation of the inscription at Pale, which is located in district Pune, Maharashtra, by Professor H.D. Sankalia and Dr. Shobna Gokhale, madam, and there was another article by Professor H.D. Sankalia, sir, clarifying his concepts about this particular inscription, where the early presence of Jainism was stretched back at least to the time period of 2nd century BCE to 1st century BCE, based on paleographic references. Based on his contribution to Jain studies, also based on his contribution to the field of archaeology and academics as such, this particular series has been named after the great scholar, Professor H.D. Sankalia. Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology has been functioning in the Department of AIHC and Archaeology at Deccan College since at least a year. Since its inception at the Deccan College, it has undertaken various activities, including intercollegiate quiz competition, national seminar, national workshop on iconography. There have been multiple courses, multiple lectures that are being done, internship program that is there. Apart from that, there are some projects that are also going on, and we also have certificate course in Jain Art and Archaeology, a one of its kind course also being undertaken by this very department. Getting back to today's lecture, which is to be delivered by Nikita Singh on the topic Art and Icons Investigating Early Medieval Jain Bronzes, Sculptures from Jharkhand. Before I invite her to speak on her topic, I would request Dhananjay Khandare, who is the research assistant of Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology, to kindly introduce the speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Our today's speaker, Nikita Singh, is currently working as a guest faculty at Motilal Nehru College, University of Delhi. She is UGC Senior Research Fellow at the Department of History, University of Delhi. She has previously worked as an assistant professor guest faculty at Hindu College, University of Delhi, and Janki Devi Memorial College. She has completed BA, MA, and MPhil from the University of Delhi. She has qualified UGC NET, JRF, and has also received travel grants from ICHR and ICSSR. Her areas of research interest include history of regions, art, archaeology, and cultural studies. She is looking at the Jain art and archaeology of Chota Nagpur and understanding its historical and contemporary dimensions. She has participated in national and international conferences. She has recently participated in the 26th International Conference of EASSA conference held at Leipzig, Germany. Thank you so much.
It is our pleasure to have you, Nikita Singh, here for our lecture series. I kindly request you to begin your lecture.
Uh, Thank you, Ocean, and thank you, Dhananjay, for such a kind introduction. So, good evening, everyone, respected distinguished scholars, guests, and dear friends. It is an honor to deliver a lecture as part of the monthly lecture series for Jain heritage named after one of the most pioneering figures in Indian archaeology, Professor H.D. Sankalia. This series that has been initiated by Bhagwan Sheetal Nath Chair for Jain Archaeology, Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology, Deccan College, Pune, is a great initiative to bring to light the various facets of Jain heritage. Professor Sankalia's exceptional contribution in the field of archaeology has left an indelible mark on the discipline and continues to inspire scholars, researchers, and students alike. His groundbreaking studies, scientific and rigorous methods have set new standards in archaeology and research. His seminal role in establishing the early presence of Jainism in Western Deccan is of supreme importance. As we delve into today's lecture, we are here not only to remember a great scholar, but to continue the legacy of inquiry and exploration that he has so passionately embraced. Now, I would like to continue with the talk, which is titled as Art and Icon, Investigating Early Medieval Jain Bronze Sculptures from Jharkhand. Before getting into the talk, my sincere thanks to Professor Shrikant Danve for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to present a small piece from my research area, and also my supervisor, Professor Parul Pandyadhar, who has been of immense support and has given immense encouragement. And here I would like to share my PPT, and do let me know if it's visible and I'm audible.
Yes, the PPT is now visible and you're audible.
Okay, thank you, Ocean. So, for over a millennia, the people of South Asia have produced works of art in seemingly endless quantity and of virtually infinite diversity. Religion was the major force stimulating the creation of art and architecture in ancient India. These artworks, at one and conveys most complex philosophical language, and at the other, simplest devotionalism. They are not just aesthetic expressions or exercise in color or form, but are visualization of the transcendent brought into the range of human understanding. Is my slide moving? Yeah. So Jainism is a living faith in India, and as such, there are a large number of Jain shrines still in worship in almost all the states of India. From 8th to 12th centuries, the eastern region of India, roughly equivalent to the modern states of Bihar, Jharkhand, West Bengal, and Orissa, was a host to fluorescence of artistic activities. Present-day state of Jharkhand is well known for its natural resources and tribal culture. Equally important are its cultural and historical heritage. From the prehistoric to the historic period, the vast landscape of this region showcases a long cultural sequence. Jainism has held a close association with Jharkhand from very early on. The Pārśvanātha Hill, which is shown in the slide, I hope my cursor is also visible. Pārśvanātha Hill, also known as the Samet Shikhara in the Giridih district of Jharkhand, is a Siddha Kshetra or Nirvana Bhumi of 20 out of 24 Tirthankars, as mentioned in various Jain literary works. Although one does not find art and architectural remains from this region, it is only from 17th century that the building of temples and artistic activity can be discerned. Second place of importance, which is not so widely known, is Koluha Hills in the Chatra district over here. Presently famous for the Koleshwari Devi temple, this place boasts of several rock-cut sculptures which are locally referred to as Dashavatar images. The antiquity of some of the ruins can be dated to 7th-8th century CE. A. Stein has located a reference to this particular place in a Jain work called Shri Tirthamala Amlok Ratna, published in Hindi in 1893 by Ratna Narayan Pal of Calcutta. In one of its map, the hill is shown mentioned as Bhadalpura Nagara, where it is stated that the 10th Tirthankar Sheetalnath Swami was born. Apart from this, there are few inscriptional references, inscriptions also found from the region. One of them is on a rugged boulder on the hill, which DC Sarkar had noticed in 1953. He read the inscription as Param Bhattaraka Maharaja Dhiraja Vishnugupta, perhaps a later Gupta king, and the inscription is dated to 7th century CE on paleographical grounds. Bulu Imam recently in his work Antiquarian Remains of Jharkhand has highlighted and talked about some 519 sites from Jharkhand. He has brought to light scores of new archaeological and cultural sites that need immediate attention. Out of this, 74 are mentioned as Jain sites. There are a list of Jain sites from the Jharkhand and the adjoining areas which were part of the erstwhile Manbhum region. We have places like Purulia. There are Purulia hosts of such Jain remains, Pakbira, Suisa, Para. Then we have Patamda, and so on and so forth. List goes on. Saraikela Kharsawar has a lot of Jain remains. Moving ahead, in the early medieval period, the foundation and endowment of temples played a central role in the development of state and society. This change resulted in the construction of temples that enshrine the divine embodiment. Jharkhand and the adjoining areas was no exception. It reciprocated with the cultural dynamics and historical developments of the adjoining plains of Ganga Valley, the coastal tracts of Odisha and West Bengal, and also the Mahanadi Baitarani valleys of the south coastal region. Several important trade routes passed through the region, and one of the most important is mentioned in an inscription, the Dudhapani rock inscription of Udayaman, assigned to 8th century CE by DC Sarkar, which refers to a route from Ayodhya to Tamaralipti undertaken by 4 merchant brothers. It also mentions 3 villages under the rule of Adi Simha, a king of Magad. Inland drainage system also played a vital role in connecting the region with the neighboring cultural zones. Major rivers like Bhagirathi, Suvarna Rekha, Damodar, Kansabati, etc. facilitated inter-region exchanges. Dilip K. Chakrabarti states that different sub-regions in Jharkhand, that is, clusters of historical settlements specifying political development, can be gauged from 8th-9th century onwards. And it was probably around this time that religious centers like Itkori, Haradi, Benisaga, Tanginath, Pakbira, and so on and so forth were established. A point to be mentioned here is that most of the temple sites that are to be found from the region are located along the inland drainage system, along the banks of Suvarnarekha, Kansabati, Damodar, and it gives us an insight to the development of Jain sites into these regions because of the importance of trade routes and the connectivity that this region had with the adjoining areas. Now, if we talk about the type of Jain remains from the region, it is mostly, we have a large corpus of Jain archaeological and architectural remains. These are mostly in the form of some dilapidated temple complexes, architectural fragments, and loose sculptures. They give us an historical background of Jain art in the region. These images, often referred to as loose sculptures in archaeological parlance, are to be found at various remote villages, fields, village boundaries, near tanks and lakes, and probably this is one of the reasons that a field work in this area becomes a little difficult because of the remote sites and the rugged terrain of the region. It is one of the deterrents. Now, studying these archaeological remains can possibly reconstruct the diversity of early medieval iconographic landscape, which may allow us also to get a glimpse of the religious life of the people at the margin. So when we look at the Jain remains, we find mostly stone sculptures, and then we have metal sculptures. These stone sculptures are made up of the locally available gray or black chloride cysts, and they are normally created in the form of separate steles that would have been set into niches. And most of the surviving metal images of this region are made up of bronze. The specific alloy varies from workshop to workshop, but most of them have a high copper content. According to texts, the alloy was to consist of 8 metals, ashtadhatu, all of which needed to be present for ritual correctness. In general, the metal images from this region are hollow cast, except in the case of smaller ones, which are usually solid. Metal sculptures in groups or singularly were used as objects of meditation and devotion. Although works of art from this region share a number of features with many distinct workshops and were responsible for the vast artistic output. This is here where the importance of region needs to be emphasized, where going along with the pan India, the regional idiom that goes on in this eastern part of India becomes significant. Both of the pan-India and the local needs to be understood hand in hand. Now, along with the regional developments, very precise chronological distinction may be made for the art of this period. Such refinements are possible because several dozen sculptures, including example both of metal and stone, survive from this period. The basic tendency of the sculptural style over this extended period was towards increased elaboration of detail and complexity of iconography, great stylization of form, stiffening of body postures, and facial features, as well as increased emphasis on detailing of the back slab. These features suggest that the developments of Jharkhand, Bihar, Bengal, they were part of the overall cultural and artistic patterns of South Asia during the post-Gupta period. Now, going into a brief discussion of the earlier works that have been undertaken in this region from art and archaeological perspective. So, the formative and the earlier explorations were undertaken by British administrators and European officials. The names of Edward Dalton, JDM Begler are of prime importance. Begler produced an exhaustive account of 103 sites showing plans and sections of several important structures with more than 120 photographs. R.D. Banerjee was the first to have dated the temples from this region and proposed the rise of a new school labeled as Eastern School of Medieval Sculptures. Then we have A. Ghosh, S.D. Prasad, K. Suresh Singh, D.R. Das, and they have investigated the temple styles and iconography from the region. Now, towards the 20th century, we see a dynamic shift in scholarship with the coming up of new generation of scholars like Dilip Chakrabarti, who carried on an extensive field work and underlined the chronocultural outline and settlement matrix of the region. Scholars like R.K. Chattopadhyay, Swati Ray have visualized the networks of settlements and their links with the external world through inland trade routes. Major artworks include that of Susan Huntington, Claudine Bouts, Dilbhar Bengra, Shubha Majumdar. Then we have Bulu Imam. We have works of H.K. Prasad, who deal with the archaeological nuances of the sculptures from the region. Now, except for one inscription which is found at Chandil in Jharkhand, that talks about the making of a Devakula or temple by a person named Dhammappa, who was the son of Bhogula. The name of the deity is not known. This is probably the only inscription, and there are few other inscriptions which are not completely available that talk about the construction of temple in the region. Now, the temples from the region are distinct in their form and mostly conform to the standard layout of Nagara style of temple architecture. Now, moving ahead with the iconography of Jain images from the region. The images of Jain Tirthankar, as is visible on the screen, are purely human in form. They do not exhibit any unusual numbers of heads, eyes, and the Jinnah images are to be found in two postures. First one is in the seated position or the Padmasan, which is the first image on the slide of Pārśvanātha from Palganj Giridih district, Jharkhand, and the second one is the standing position with hands falling downwards and touching the knees, is the Kayut Sarg or Khadgasasana posture from the Singhbhum region of Jharkhand. These depict the bodily poses for Jain meditation. The Jinnah image is intended, and it is to be seen all across, intended to depict the enlightened beings who have overcome all bodily attachments and passions and thereby become pure disembodied souls. Now, when we talk about Jharkhand, the Jain figures, so when we talk about the postures in Jharkhand, most of the sculptures that we find from the region are in the Kayut Sarg Mudra, with a few in the Padmasan. And one of the distinguishing features of Jain figures are the long hanging arms. The Shrivat symbol, however, is missing in most of the stone sculptures from the region. The mild form, youthful body, and nudity showing affiliation to the Digambar tradition. Other characteristics include Yaksha and Yakshini depicted on the pedestal, and then we have the 8 Pratiharyas, the Yakshana, the Chaumukhas, the various Chaumukhas are to be found from the region. Then we have Jain tutelary couples. This first image is of Rishabhnath, which is a Chaubisi style sculpture from Jharkhand representing 24 Tirthankars. In middle we have Shantinath with the representation of 8 grahas, Ashtagrahas, which is a common iconographic specificity of the Jain remains from Jharkhand. Then we have Jain tutelary couples. Apart from this, we have various types of Tirthankar images also. We have single depiction, we have Dvitirthika, Panchtirthika, Chaubisi with planetary deities, with Ashtadikpalas in few cases. And when I'm talking about these sculptures, I'm looking at the larger region of Manbhum, which included Jharkhand and the adjoining areas of Bengal. And so these are the various kinds of images that we find from the region. Now, if we talk about, having talked about the stone sculptures, like the stone sculptures, metal sculpture represent a significant aspect of Jain art and religious expression. The intricate craftsmanship of Jain bronzes not only reflects the artistic skills of their creators, but also provide an insight into the religious and cultural practices. Now, if the Jain bronzes can be divided into various types, starting from as early as 2nd century CE to up to 19th century CE, and the portrayal of Tirthankar, single Tirthankar, remain unvaried in terms of iconography. The earliest from Eastern India is the earliest and the most substantial evidence of metal images in Eastern India is provided by the hoard of 16 icons of Jain Tirthankar, all recovered from a field in the village of Chausa in Sahabar district of Bihar, as is visible on the screen. Apart from the fact that these icons indicate the definite existence of a flourishing Jain establishment and Jain community in the region, they also give us a clear idea of the nature and character of the art activity in this part of India. If one looks at all these sculptures from left to right, it becomes very clear that the asanas, the sthanas, the general arrangement of hair, the arms, the hands, they belong to a common denominator. They are relatively heavy and tall in proportion, broad in shoulders, and heavy and expanding in their chests. Their faces are either round or ovoid, eyes wide open with bulging pupils, lips wide and set apart and turned to smile, earlobes hanging and neck heavy and round. Standing or seated, their heavy, full and round physical frame is presented in full and rigid frontality. The first image over here is of Rishabhnath, as indicated by the falling hair locks on his shoulder. The second one in Kayut Sarga is also a sculpture of Rishabhnath, and the third one is of Pārśvanātha. However, we do not find the cognizances or lanchanas for these sculptures because it is dated to Kushana period, and the cognizances start appearing from around 5th, 6th century and probably later in the eastern region of India. From 5th century, images depicting sitting and standing Tirthankara framed by a wide range of iconographic elements and attending figures appear. One of the most important example is the Akota bronzes from Gujarat, where the iconography is advanced and includes not only the addition of attending figures like yakshas, chamardharas, and also dharm chakra, lion throne, etc. So if one looks at these particular images dated from around 6th century to 11th century CE, it is a huge hoard. One see a stark iconographic development, the elaboration, the ornamentation of the pedestal, the expansion of the parikar elements, it becomes very obvious. And there are few sculptures from Bihar, also from 5th, 6th century CE, that are found in various private collections, where we have depictions of Tirthankar, then we have Ambika, the tutelary couples, and so on and so forth, which show high ornamentation and iconographic refinement. The another important hode that needs to be mentioned here is the Achyut Rajpur hode from Odisha, consisting of 92 objects, in which we have 10 images of Tirthankar, and the hode is dated from 8th to 11th century CE. So here are the few sculptures from the Akota Achyut Rajpur hode, and a work by Debala Mitra has gone into the details of iconography of each of these sculptures, and dated from 8th to 11th century CE. Now, moving ahead, the development of iconographical repertoire, probably by adding a yaksha couple to the main icon, from around 6th, 7th century, the Dvitirthika, Panchtirthika images started appearing, giving the sculptures a more vertical and stacked appearance. And this led to the development of parikar, a decorated ark, which is adorned with attending figures and ornamentation, as one can see in this the Akota group of bronzes. But is it the case of Jharkhand? We'll be discussing shortly. So most of the surviving metal images from the regions, as mentioned, are of bronze with high copper content. Though Jharkhand is rich in the field of stone sculptures, very few sites yield bronze sculptures, and they are mostly small, easily portable objects. Their small size and the advantage of the easy portability, as well as their find in a hode, would point that at least some of them were used for pious offerings of the devotees and monks, pilgrims' desire of earning religious merit. The first important group of hode is the Alura bronzes. So this particular group of bronzes, consisting of 29 Jain sculptures, was found in March 1947 in the Aluara area of Jharkhand, present day very close to Dhanbad. And the 27 of the images of Jain, one of them is a female deity, probably an Ambika, and other one is a Jain Tirthankar head. These are now placed in the Bihar Museum of Patna. These images, if one goes back to the Chausa hode, is very different from the Chausa in their technique, form, and depiction. And although these images have been dated from around 10th to 12th century CE, we see that in how the body of the Tirthankar becomes stiff, slimmer, columnar, and yet there is a kind of local influence in the iconography, the facial expression that we see on the bronze sculptures from this region. The images generally have a delicacy and charm, and but of a local influence. Now, some of the images from the hode has urna, which is a dot at the forehead, and all of them are associated with the respective lanchanas. And the pedestal, what we see here is that the pedestals of most of the images are seen in two tiers, okay, and in various tiers. Some of them are decorated with figures of acharyas, navgrahas, and the lanchanas, and this is the specific thing that is to be found from all the bronzes from the region. The second important group of hode that was found from the region is from the Baharagoda, East Singhbhum, Jharkhand. These are now placed in the State Museum, Ranchi. These are 8 beautiful Digambar Jain images made up of bronze again. And most of these sculptures have small inscriptions, some donative inscriptions, some showing affiliation to a particular acharya, and so on and so forth. Now, I'll go into the iconographic details of these images. The first, all the 3 images on the slide are that of Rishabhnath. How do we know that it is a Rishabhnath? Now, Rishabhnath is usually identifiable by his cognizance, the bull resting on the pedestal in front. The figure's nudity clearly indicates Digambar association. The most notable aspect of the figure are the hairstyles. Normally, when we look at the Jinnah images who have snail shell hair with a protuberance of the skull known as Ushanisha, the coiffure in this case, even though resembling the Jata Mukut, crown of mated hair, seen in Shaivite images, is nonetheless distinctive. This feature, this particular representation of hairstyle, is not only restricted to the erstwhile Manabhum region, but is exclusive to the Rishabhnath images from the region. So these representations are to be found in the Jharkhand, Bengal, as well as in Odisha, the parts of which together form the Manabhum region, and which was probably a Jain circuit in the early medieval time period of the region. Now, this first image over here is part of the Alora bronze, depicts Rishabhnath, recognized by the hair locks, the Kesavalari falling on the shoulders, and the Lanchana in front. He's standing on a lotus pedestal in the usual Kayut Sarga posture. Having urna on forehead and Shrivats. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, that Shrivats is not to be found in the stone sculptures of Jharkhand. But here in bronze sculptures, few of the sculptures, we see the coming up of Srivatsa mark as well. Because these symbols are not found, as I mentioned, in the stone sculptures. Now, to this particular image is attached a small subsidiary figure over here. It has been identified as a kneeling devotee, but to my understanding, it represents an acharya or someone from a monastic setting, with probably the kind of hair that he has. Also, he's shown holding an object in his hand and carrying a small potli at the back. The sculpture also has an inscription that mentions Acharya Maila. Okay, so in my understanding, it could be the Acharya himself. I am to still look into the greater details of the monastic setting, but here this is my understanding. Now, the second image of Tirthankar, which is again Rishabhnath, can be identified with the iconographical specificities, but the image is abraded, and so the iconographic features are not clearly visible. Now, the third image again is from the Alora bronze, and here the facial expression is quite interesting. Usually, the Tirthankar images have a very calm and meditative expressions, but here it's the opposite. But probably the artistic skill was not that developed, probably, or I don't know, some local influence could have led to this kind of facial expression. Moving ahead, these are the two images from Bhadgora, Singhbhum district of Jharkhand. Again, here the iconography with the Jata Mukut and the Kesavalari remains the same. Here the Lanchan in the first image is placed frontally, and both the images with a slight difference in the Kesavalari, the placement and the curls of the Kesavalari almost remains the same. This image over here, the first image is from Manbhum, Jharkhand. This is a part of the collection of New Orleanian Dr. Siddharth K. Bhansali's private collection. This is again interesting because here it is from the Manbhum region. We see the Kesavalari, but the Jata Mukut is missing from the sculpture. Whether it's lost, whether it has been destroyed due to erosion or whatever, I don't know. But from here, what we can see is that the Kesavalari is missing. Also is the arrangement of miniature subsidiary figures in the pedestal in a circular form. This is the only such representation of the subsidiary figures arranged in such a manner from the region. I have put here a second image from Odisha, and which is now a part of the Indian Museum, Kolkata. Here we can see the close affinity of the iconography with the images in the Alwara bronzes and the Bhargora bronzes. Okay, but here the refinement is of greater importance. The beautifully and neatly mated hair of the Rishabhnath is of importance, and also the clear representation of the lanchan of Rishabhnath in the pedestal. Moving ahead, now we come to the representations of Mahavira. These two sculptures are also from the Alora group of bronzes. Mahavira is identified by the Lanchan lion as depicted in the lower portion of the pedestal in the first image. Although it's not visible over here, I think by mistake I've cut the lower portion of the image. We have a lion depicted in the pedestal of the image. Now he's standing in a double lotus pedestal, completely devoid of worldly attire. Hair tied into an Ushanisha. The Tirthankar here is placed in a 4-pillared chhatra, which is topped by an Amlak Shila and a Kalash almost resembling a temple. The body is slender and finely executed, seems to be of a later date than the other bronzes from the Hod. The Urna and Srivatsa are also not present. This particular image also has an inscription that mentions Shri Anand Tasya Putra Vannati Thakur Muni. Okay, and this second image over here is also recognized as that of Mahavira. The urna reappears over here, and the pedestal inscription mentions Shri Acharya Ratna Chandra Saha Yakasya. Moving ahead, we have Pārśvanātha. Pārśvanātha, here I have shown two images of Pārśvanātha from the Pārśvanātha from the Alora group of bronzes. The first one identified by the serpent hood as his Lanchana, standing on a double lotus pedestal, and two subsidiary figures at the base, as I have shown over here, most probably Yaksha Dharnendra and Yakshi Padmavati rising out in a serpent coil. Such representations of Pārśvanātha is also to be found in the stone sculptures. Over here, as you can see, you have the two figures coming out from the pedestal in a serpentine coil. This particular sculpture also has an inscription which unfortunately is unreadable due to erosion. The second image of Pārśvanātha is again identified with the serpent hood seated on a lotus pedestal, is very similar to the previous Mahavira image with a double chhatra placed on 4 pillars. Here at the base of the image can be identified 9 subsidiary figures, which were probably the Navagrahas. Which are the Navagrahas? Start appearing in Jain iconography from 6th and 7th century CE, and in the Bengal and Jharkhand region from around 9th century CE. Here we have an inscription that states Shri Acharya Sumaila. Okay. What we see here is a very natural representation of the Navagrahas in Padmasan at the base of this particular sculpture. Just a second. So these Jain bronzes are placed in the Jain Museum in the Madhuban area of Giridih district. Now, this is very interesting because the two sculptures here and here, we see a parikar frame in both these images. The fine spot of these sculptures is not known. It is just mentioned, found during excavation. That is what the label at the museum says. It is probably of Tritirthika images of image, and here here we do not have any such representation. What is interesting is that again we have here Navagrahas, which are represented in a very abstract manner with 9 small squares that is represented over here. The greater detailing, the Tirthankars cannot be identified because the Lanchanas are not visible clearly. We have the Yakshi figures for sure. It is a Ratha pedestal over here. But however, to my understanding, looking at the previous Jain sculptures from the region, this probably is not from Jharkhand, and it has been wrongly labeled in the museum. But I'll look into the details further. But that is what I see, because such kind of parikar setting is not from the region. Yeah, in fact, the way the face cut, the iconography is not very particular to the region. And this particular Tirthankar, again, we see in the Dhyanasana, and it cannot be identified because the Lanchana is missing. Now, various sculptures from the Ellora bronzes identified of that of Kuntunath, Shantinath, Mahavir, Neminath have these planetary deities arranged on the pedestal, right? So what becomes significant over here is that instead of the parikar elements or the arrangement of the navgrahas on the sides, all of these find place in the pedestal, and the pedestal becomes two-tiered. Here in this particular image in the middle, at all the places the cognizance is placed with the graha figures, but here the cognizance move upwards, probably because of the lack of space, and all the grahas were to be represented properly. So the Lanchana has moved in the upper tier of this pedestal. So these are very specific representations that we find in Ellora bronzes from the region. Another interesting figure is the Dvitirthika image found in the Ellora bronzes again. Here we have Rishabhnath and Mahavir identified by their lanchans. Rishabhnath also with the hairdo and the kesa falling on the shoulder. The Shri Vats and Urna mark on the forehead is clearly visible. The Prabha Mandal, or the halos behind the heads, are placed on a crossbar and surmounted by a trilinear chhatra. If we compare this sculpture with the Dvitirthika stone sculpture from Odisha, one notices quite a few similarities. The representation of Rishabhnath and Mahavira is the most common combination to be found from the region in Dvitirthika images. Such a comparison leads to an understanding that the iconographic vocabulary of the artisans was transmitted across the regions and shows a close cultural association. Here, the Prabha Mandals are supported by this beam, probably also representing a throne. And these are very simple. We have the trilinear chhatra, we have the flower motifs. If we look at these particular sculpture over here, this is though it is a stone sculpture, but the iconographic setting becomes very familiar if we look at both the images. Moving ahead, we have Ambika, the representation of Ambika over here from the Ellora whole. The word Amba, Ambika, Ambalika, Ambi are of great antiquity. These words have several applications, but the most common is the mother, which is reflected in the concept of the iconography of Jain Yakshi Ambika. The earliest archaeological evidence from around 500 CE we find in the Akota bronzes, and from 9th century onwards, Ambika enjoyed a still greater popularity, as is evidenced by the innumerable instances of her rendering in sculpture and painting, which is also seen in the eastern part of India. Various examples of this are found in eastern regions. She mainly remained two-armed and at most four, with a few exceptions showing more. One such sculpture is a part of the Ellora bronzes. But here I would like to mention this particular image of Ambika from Bihar that has been dated to 5th century CE and part of a private collection. Here we see that apart from the Akota bronzes, we can find the representation of Ambika from the Bihar region as well. She is shown holding a child and an amrulumbi in her right hand. Coming back to the image of Ambika, Ambika standing in an abhang posture on a lotus pedestal is ornamented. Her Vahan lion is depicted on the pedestal. She has a distinct hairdo, probably holding an amrulumbi in her right hand, and left hand touching her knees. A child is depicted on the right side and probably another child which is missing on the left. They may be identified as Siddha and Buddha. Ambika, acknowledged as the Yakshi of 22nd Tirthankar Neminath, enjoyed an exalted position in Jain pantheon. She is considered as one of the four most popular Yakshis, Chakreshwari, Padmavati being the other, who are endowed with great power and occupy a special venerated position. So, having discussed all these sculptures over here, the presence of bronze sculptures and the numerous stone sculptures that we come across from the region is probably the best signifier of Jain antiquity in the region. Early medieval period marked by artistic development and fervor in the eastern India, which in its religious and iconological, literary and artistic manifestation had very close denominators of their own. Neha Ranjan Ray, in the work Eastern Bronzes of India, gives a statement: geographical proximity, common ecology and climate, common social political ideas and institutions, and common social economic pattern have contributed towards common denominators, what may be called an Eastern Indian cultural identity and personality. Most of these sculptures from Jharkhand are of cultic significance, small in size, portability, which increases the portability, and have a common artistic and iconographic denominator. In the physical absence of the Tirthankar, the guidance of the religious order is provided by the ascetics, probably divided into three categories, which together with the Tirthankar and the Siddhas form the Panch Parmeshtins. The first is the leader of the group of the ascetics, who are responsible for the conduct and welfare of the groups, the acharyas, the upadhyayas, and then we have the sadhus. So in the particular image of Rishabhnath, we see the representation of Acharya probably, and quite a few sculptures have inscriptions mentioning Munis, Acharyas, and donation, attesting to the presence of religious center and probably some kind of monastic establishment. Various stone sculptures from the erstwhile region of Manbhum also was part of a Jain circuit in eastern India. Representation of acharyas are to be found in the pedestal. Such representations are to be found from the Deoghar region, as discussed by Klaus Brun, and he has studied the sculptural remains and identified and classified the Jain acharyas or monks probably, and they start appearing from around 1000 CE. Most of the images belong to a common set of artistic understanding and has some local influence. Most important are the representation of luncheons on the pedestal of the images. The figures are well built with columnar legs without any animation. The overall treatment of the body surface being stiff. As mentioned earlier, the sculptures are placed between 10th to 11th century CE. While we find an increased ornamentation, ever expanding parikar elements with increasing vertical alignment in other parts of India during this period, the bronzes from Jharkhand are comparatively simpler and the focus remains on the Jinnah. However, the pedestal of these images show definition and ornamentation with the presence of subsidiary figures, but that is about it. The image of Ambika, the artist took the liberty with ornamentation. The drapery, jewelry, and the hair are worth appreciation. The Jinnah images lack worldly attires, and hence not much experimentation can be expected in their images. Grahas, which are again found in the Brahmanical context and start appearing around 6th-7th century CE, as mentioned earlier, appears in the Jinnah images from 9th century CE onwards in eastern India. Having discussed the various specificities of the Jain bronzes from the region, it becomes very clear that the coming up of temples, such icons and bronze sculptures, the image worship in early medieval period in the region, which is dominated by tribal population who tend to associate themselves more with the worship of their ancestors, nature, and local gods and deities, is a striking phenomena in itself. The study of archaeological evidences makes it clear that the region was never secluded from the mainstream historical processes. The religious spheres are embedded in various ways within the multiple spheres of social, political, and economic activity. It is this embeddedness which makes it a meaningful and integral element of the human culture. On that note, I would like to end the lecture and open the session for a Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nikita, for this wonderful lecture. Your lecture not only covered the iconographic aspects of the Jain bronzes found from the region of Jharkhand, but they were also very much in context of the inscriptions of the growth of a particular sects, also of the particular cultic origins of certain images, say the Rishabhnath image and the other presence of the monastic order, and how their role has played an important role in the dissemination of Jainism in the region of Eastern India, specifically the present day state of Jharkhand. Now we would turn towards some questions. So I would read it out and then you may take them up. So Sneha Agarwal is asking, it looks or seems like the Dokra bronze casting technique. This is very old technique of bronze casting, which is still in practice in the parts of Bankura, Bardhaman, etc. Recently, this art form got GI tag. Maybe was there some connection? So she's inquisitive.
Thank you for the question. So should I answer simultaneously? Like we'll give one question and one answer. Okay.
Yes.
So yes. The Dokra art from the eastern part of India is practiced till date, and as I mentioned, there's a lot of local influence in the kind of iconography of these particular bronze sculptures from the region. If there are few sculptures from dating to around 10th 11th century from the region that are found in the State Museum Ranchi, that are very identical with the Dokra art form of present day Jharkhand, and that influence can somehow be seen in the Jain images as well, with the kind of facial expression, the crude nature of the facial expression, and the slender body. Slender body, not particularly, but specifically the crude expression of these images are very identical with the Dokra art. And various cultic objects also from this time period resemble the Dokra art, which are now present in the State Museum Ranchi. Yeah.
Thank you. There's an inquiry by Jaikumar Jain. He is asking about the time period of the Chausa bronze hoard.
Chausa bronze hoard is placed in the Kushana period. The Kayut Sarga posture images are of a little later date, but the sitting images are from the Kushana period, as has been identified by various scholars over the period of time.
Yes, thank you. Anjali Kavade is asking, why were bronze metal preferred for Jain sculptures, and how did they enhance or what is their ritual significance?
So these are basically cultic objects used for worshipping in the private setting. These were small, portable, easy to carry, and that was probably the most important significance of these Jain bronzes compared to the huge stone sculptures that we find in the temples of the time period.
Thank you. There are so many words of appreciation for you. And Suvarna Jain is saying, an excellent presentation, very informative. She has two questions. The Aluara images have inscription in which language and script? Approximately average sizes of the bronze images of Aluara.
Yeah, so I think I forgot mentioning that. It is in the Nagari script and Sanskrit language, and the size of the images vary from 16 centimeter to up to 22 centimeter in height.
Okay, thank you. Jaikumar Jainji is saying that these idols show a great existence of Jainism in Jharkhand. Can you please suggest the reason of the decline or degeneration of Jainism in that particular area?
So there's a gap in the development of Jainism in this particular region. From the ancient time to the early medieval, most of the sculptures that we find are from the 10th to 12th century CE, probably because of the artistic efflorescence in the region, the entire eastern belt with the coming of the Palas and the Senas. But the decline is obviously we see that decline is seen in all the religious traditions of eastern India, with the coming in of the Delhi Sultans, the moving in the eastern part of India, with the destruction of the temples and images and so on. There are innumerable reasons, and also most of the sites, as I mentioned, is placed along the trading routes. People were passing to and fro from the region, and also the area, as I mentioned, is a very difficult terrain to live in. So probably it became an important center, but people traveled to and fro through this region, and the important sites, the Samet Shikhar and the Kaluha Hill, became important, and people visited and went back. And this is what I can think of at this moment. Yeah.
So connecting the thing that you were saying right now about Samet Shikhar, we have a question by Rupesh Madkar sir, and he's asking whether these or the other inscriptions from this region shed any light on the rise of Shikharji as a holy place or a Siddha Kshetra.
This is a very interesting thing that I mentioned also, that Samed Shikhar ji, the Pārśvanātha Hill, is known is such an important pilgrim site. But unfortunately, we do not find any sculptural representations or architectural fragments from the region from in the early medieval period or earlier. It is only from the 16th century and 17th century that we see activities happening in that region. So it becomes very difficult to state the fact that Samed Shikhar has obviously people were traveling through and fro, but why is there an absence of architectural remains from the region remains a bigger question. But yes, that place held an importance, and because of that, the entire circuit, I think, developed in the eastern region of India.
We have another question by Priyanka Rakshit, and they are asking whether you can elaborate on the inscription found in Chandil more.
Okay, so as I mentioned, that it only talks about the construction of a Devakula, which is a temple by Dhammappa, son of Bhogula. That is all we have, and it is also stated that Dhammappa was a devotee of Trailoki Vijaya. That is all, and it is not a Jain inscription per se, but the one of the only inscriptions of temple building activity dated to 7th 8th century. So most of the temples that we find from the region are single cell structures, but there are no inscriptions as such that talk about the donation or the coming up of these temples or the artistic activity from the region. So yeah.
Yes, interesting. Saurabh is asking, who were the followers of Jainism in these areas? Were they traders or local tribal population or craftsmen? And there's another question connecting to that, who is asking whether Jainism has influenced any tribal community or something like that. I've missed that question. Yes, yes, is there any evidence that how Jainism and Jain philosophy influenced any tribal culture in these areas of Jharkhand?
Okay, so according to my understanding, the very scant inscriptional references that we have, most of these activities, the Jain artistic activities, were undertaken by the lay community or probably the traders who were passing through the region, because we do not find royal grants, land grants, or any donative aspect that can be seen from the region. So it was probably the trading community and the lay followers, and also the coming up of monastic settlement with the area which needs to be explored more, could have facilitated the development of these temple architecture and the other sculptures from the region. Any tribal community? Yes, we have a Sarak community that presently lives in and around the Sarai Kela Kharsama region of Jharkhand. So this particular community is supposed to be the followers of Jainism in the period that we are referring to. They are the early metal workers from the region, and the kind of lifestyle that they follow is also very similar to the lifestyle that people from Jain faith follow, and they associate themselves with the Jain remains of the region. They are very few in number, but they are often referred to as Sarak or the Shravaks, the lay followers. That is how it is. And but this particular name quite often appears in the modern in the contemporary accounts of various government records as well, the Sarak Jains.
Yes. We will take just one last question by Jaikumar Jainji, and he's saying, In Jharkhand, which place is having the oldest archaeological evidence related to Jainism?
The oldest archaeological. So I think the Patamda region of Jharkhand. So the earliest images that we find from the region is dated to around 9th century and 10th century. So that is the earliest Jain images that we find from the Jharkhand, and they are scattered over the Sarai Kela Kharsama region of Jharkhand mostly. And if we move a little ahead, it is found in the Purulia district of West Bengal, which was, as I have mentioned, was a part of erstwhile Manbhum region in eastern India.
Thank you, Nikita. There's one more question by Ashutosh Jha. He's asking if you could suggest him some readings regarding the subject.
Yeah, so as I was mentioning, the works of the first name who has done person who has done extensive work very recent time is Shubha Majumdar. He has worked extensively on the Jain remains of Purulia, particularly, and Bengal. Then we have works of we have various works scattered over the period of time, like we have R.K. Chattopadhyay, R.K. Chattopadhyay's work, we have Swati Ray's work, we have Dilip Chakrabarti's work, which deal with some of the images from the region, and so on and so forth. First, you can start with the early accounts of J.D. Begler, that will give you a good insight into the kind and types of Jain sculptural remains from the region.
Thank you very much, Nikita, for the wonderful lecture and for a very interactive session that we had in the question and answer round. I would now request Prashant, Prashant, who is the research fellow of Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology, to kindly propose a formal vote of thanks. And just to add up, Nikita, your lecture was attended by around 85 people throughout the lecture, and there is a presence of so many eminent scholars working in the field of visual arts, Jain art, art history, and so many other related fields. So it was very nice lecture, very much appreciated by so many people. You can just read the chat box. And I now request Prashant to kindly propose a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you so much. It was an honor and pleasure.
Thank you, Ocean. On behalf of Bhagwan Sheetalnath Chair for Jain Archaeology, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Ms. Nikita Singh for her insightful lecture on art and icons, investigating early medieval Jain bronze sculpture from Jharkhand. Your research has provided us with a deeper understanding of this subject. I am also thankful to Professor Parul Pandyadhar, Dr. Pavan Jain, Dr. Naren Parsan, Manish Mehta, Sharon Jain, Shantanu Gite, Rupesh Matkar for joining today's lecture. Your presence and engagement have added great value for this session. I also appreciate all participants for their engagement and active participation in the lecture. Special thanks to technical team for smooth coordination of this lecture. With this, I conclude the session with sincere thanks to all. Thank you.